They.
No. The guy in the back can't hear you. Go ahead, a little more, baby. Loosen up. Hey.
They. You may be my leader, but I'm gonna punch you right in your mouth.
Come fly with me. Let's fly. Let's fly away. These iconic lyrics from one of Frank Sinatra's most famous songs invite us to step into the glamorous and intriguing world of the Rat Pack. This legendary group of performers, which included Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, defined an entire era with their unmatched style, talent, and charisma. Their names alone conjure up images of dazzling Las Vegas nights, impeccable fashion, and unforgettable hits like That's Amore and The Way You Look Tonight. However, behind the smoke-filled spotlight, booze-fueled swagger, and the veneer of unshakable camaraderie, the Rat Pack was a tangled web of secrets, tensions, and even bitter rivalries that often remain concealed from the adoring public eye. In this video, we'll descend deep down in the murky depths of history, taking a closer look at the fascinating and sometimes shocking backstory of this iconic group. From their early days in the nightclubs of New York and Chicago to their reign as entertainment royalty in Vegas and Hollywood, it's time to look beyond the Rat Pack's cool facade and discover the real story behind one of the most iconic ensembles in show business history. Stick around to find out which two Rat Pack members utterly hated each other. The origins of the Rat Pack. The term Rat Pack was coined by actress Lauren Bacall when she saw her husband Humphrey Bogart and his friends returning from a wild night out in Las Vegas in the late 1950s. She exclaimed, "You look like a goddamn Rat Pack." In those days, Bogart and Bacall's home was the center of celebrity mischief, with stars like Errol Flynn, Ava Gardner, and Nat King Cole regularly stopping by to party. The original Rat Pack included Frank Sinatra as the leader, Judy Garland, Sid Luft, Bogart, Swifty Lazar, and Nathaniel Benchley. As the 50s gave way to the 60s, new members joined the pack, including Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford. With Sinatra at the helm, this stylish quintet became the talk of Tinseltown for a brief but memorable period. Lawford's Hollywood rise.
I've drunk a lot of scotch. I've drunk it with people like Frank, Dean, Sammy. I even had one with the Duke of Wellington.
From the start, Peter Lawford stood out as the misfit of the Rat Pack. Unlike his fellow members, Lawford hailed from Britain and lacked the singing and dancing chops that made the others famous. However, what he lacked in musical talent, he more than made up for with his acting skills. Lawford began his career at Elstree Studios in England before making the leap to Hollywood and MGM, where he quickly rose to stardom in the 1940s and 50s. Despite being in his late 20s, he became one of the highest-paid actors in the world. Lawford's breakout role came in 1942 when he starred opposite Mickey Rooney in A Yank at Eton. He further solidified his reputation with his portrayal of quarterback Tommy Marlowe in the 1947 college-themed movie Good News, which garnered him critical praise. With his dashing good looks and undeniable screen presence, Peter Lawford effortlessly embodied the quintessential debonair Englishman. His tall, handsome appearance and impeccable sense of style, both on and off screen, made him a perfect fit for the Hollywood glamour machine. Lawford exuded sophistication, looking every bit the part of a suave leading man when dressed in a well-tailored suit. One of his most memorable roles was as Jimmy Foster in the 1960 Rat Pack film, Ocean's 11. In the movie, Lawford donned a striking midnight blue tuxedo for a New Year's Eve scene, showcasing his sartorial elegance and cementing his place as a style icon. Despite his charm and talent, Lawford was often regarded as a protege of sorts to Cary Grant, never quite achieving the same level of success as his mentor. Of course, it's worth noting that Grant's own career was allegedly fueled by his use of LSD, a feat that Lawford never attempted to match. At first glance, Lawford's inclusion in the Rat Pack might have seemed puzzling to some. However, those who looked beyond the surface quickly realized that his true value lay not in his acting abilities alone, but in the powerful connections he brought to the table. The Kennedy Connection. Peter Lawford's 1954 marriage to Patricia Kennedy, the younger sister of John F. Kennedy, raised eyebrows in Hollywood. Known for his womanizing ways, Lawford's decision to wed into one of America's most powerful political dynasties was met with skepticism. However, the couple went on to have 4 children together, and from the outside, their union appeared to be genuine. As a Hollywood star, a member of the Rat Pack, and now a Kennedy in-law, Lawford seemed to have it all. He campaigned tirelessly for JFK, and the Rat Pack openly supported the Democratic candidate. Sinatra even nicknamed Lawford Brother-in Lawford and sought to leverage his political connections for his own benefit. This ultimately proved to be Lawford's undoing. He had promised Sinatra that JFK would stay at the singer's Palm Springs estate during a visit, and Sinatra went so far as to construct a helipad on the property. However, at the last moment, JFK's advisors warned against staying with Sinatra due to the singer's alleged ties to organized crime. The president instead chose to stay with Bing Crosby. Sinatra was furious. In a fit of rage, he destroyed the helipad, cut Lawford out of the Rat Pack, and refused to speak to him. The only exception came when Frank Sinatra Jr. was kidnapped in December 1963, and Sinatra reached out to Lawford to enlist the help of his brother-in-law, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. Although Lawford continued to act after the falling out, his career never fully recovered. His marriage to Patricia Kennedy ended in divorce in 1966, a few years after JFK's assassination. The relationship had been strained by Lawford's infidelity, drinking, and drug use. The Marilyn Monroe scandal.
If he had gone there, she might have been too far gone anyway. I mean, who knows? Yeah, he felt guilt about it.
Peter Lawford had another connection to the Kennedys through Marilyn Monroe. In fact, Lawford was the last person to speak with Monroe before her tragic death, having called her on the night she passed away. As part of the same social circle, Lawford knew Monroe well, and their mutual relationships with the Kennedy brothers only strengthened their bond. Rumors persist that Monroe had secret affairs with both John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy, and some even suggest that it was Lawford who first introduced her to JFK. In the aftermath of Monroe's death, Lawford found himself in the middle of the controversy, reportedly visiting her apartment to ensure that no evidence of her relationship with the president was left behind. The Marilyn Monroe scandal. After being exiled from the Rat Pack and the Kennedy inner circle, Lawford's career went into a tailspin. He sought solace in the company of his three steadfast companions: alcohol, drugs, and women. His second marriage lasted a mere 2 years, while his third ended after just 2 months. In 1984, Lawford married for the fourth time, but he passed away shortly thereafter. Years of hard living had finally caught up with him, as had his financial troubles. Lawford succumbed to kidney and liver failure, and although he was cremated, no one was willing to pay for his ashes. To be interred. In a final indignity, his widow scattered his remains into the Pacific Ocean from a boat funded by the tabloid newspaper, the National Enquirer, in exchange for exclusive coverage of the event. The Pack's carefully crafted image.
I'm not lazy. They want to think I'm lazy, but they know I work. I mean, could I be where I am today if I were lazy and if I were a boozer?
The boozy, womanizing persona of the Rat Pack that captivated audiences in the 1960s was a far cry from reality. Behind the scenes, these were shrewd, hard-working entertainers and businessmen who recognized an opportunity to cash in on a trending vibe. As Richard A. Lertzman, co-author of Deconstructing the Rat Pack, told Fox News, "To this day, people still believe these were a bunch of guys in their 40s partying and getting loads of girls. On stage, you saw them freely improvising, womanizing, and drinking it up. Dean was always the happy drunk, but in reality, he was sipping on apple juice." Martin's daughter Dina confirmed her father was very much a family man who came home to his children, not the non-stop partier he portrayed on stage. Lertzman noted it would have been impossible for these middle-aged men to be shooting films at 6 a.m., engaging in all-night revelry, and still delivering stellar nightly performances. "The truth is, these were businessmen who saw a giant payday," he said. They capitalized on the carefully crafted bad boy mystique, spreading stories of debauchery that kept fans enthralled while maintaining a grueling work schedule in reality. The apple juice ruse.
Drink? Now, this is only a gag. I don't drink anymore. I freeze it now and I eat it like a popsicle.
The whiskey glass that rarely left Dean Martin's hand on stage? It was most often filled with Martinelli's apple juice, not booze. After his shows, rather than raising hell at parties, he preferred to don pajamas and watch westerns alone in his room. If the festivities got too loud, he was known to call the cops on his own soirees. His daughter Deanna described him as a sweetheart of a guy, despite the skirt-chasing, slurring, drunken image he portrayed for audiences. It was all show business shtick, the Facade Cracks. The cracks in the Rat Pack facade became apparent during a much-hyped 1988 reunion tour with the surviving members, Sinatra, Martin, and Davis. After a few performances, Martin abruptly quit, claiming kidney problems, then promptly began performing solo in Vegas days later. He joked, "Frank sent me a kidney, but I don't know whose it was." An irate Sinatra reportedly dumped a plate of spaghetti on Martin's head after one lackluster performance, where Martin chain-smoked, slurred his words, flubbed lyrics, and tossed a lit cigarette into the audience. The tour collapsed, and the old friends were estranged, only reconciling shortly before Martin's death in 1995. The feud exposed that the easygoing camaraderie the Rat Pack had long projected was, to a degree, an illusion. But it was an immensely profitable and popular illusion while it lasted. Sammy Davis Jr.'s tragic self-destruction.
I got an idea.
I'd like to thank the NAACP for this wonderful trophy.
Sammy Davis Jr. was a pioneering African-American entertainer, but he paid a heavy price for his fame and Rat Pack inclusion. The sole black member of the group, he endured blatant racism, including from his so-called friend. Their stage shows frequently featured racially charged comedy with Davis as the butt of demeaning jokes. Some decried Davis for debasing himself as an Uncle Tom figure to gain acceptance from white audiences and his famous cohorts. Others saw him as a brave trailblazer who paved the way for other black entertainers despite the degrading jibes and discrimination he faced, even having to stay at segregated hotels while headlining with the rest of the Rat Pack. His 1960 interracial marriage to Swedish actress May Britt provoked an onslaught of racist abuse at a time when such unions were still illegal across much of America. Sinatra urged him to delay the wedding to avoid jeopardizing John F. Kennedy's presidential campaign. While Davis campaigned for Kennedy, he was snubbed and forbidden from appearing at Kennedy's inauguration so as not to offend racist voters. According to Davis's daughter, this deeply wounded her father. She believes it was one of the factors that fueled his later descent into substance abuse. Drowning his sorrows. A 1954 car accident cost Davis an eye. During his recovery, he began abusing alcohol and drugs to combat the crippling pain and post-traumatic stress. Friends, including Sinatra, tried to help him overcome his addictions, but he would struggle with substance issues for the rest of his life. Racial prejudice continued to haunt him. A planned wedding to another white woman was called off after mobster Mickey Cohen allegedly threatened to kill Davis and his father unless he married a black woman instead. Davis went through with a sham wedding to a black showgirl. That same year, he attempted suicide, a life cut short.
He was a wonderful, wonderful boy. What?
The entertainer's substance abuse escalated in his later years. He developed a $2,000 a week cocaine habit, and his behavior grew increasingly erratic, straining his relationship with his Rat Pack comrades. In 1990, he died of throat cancer at age 64. Many felt his self-destructive lifestyle contributed to his premature death. To the end, Davis remained a complicated, divisive figure. His indomitable talent could not be denied, but the scars racism left on his psyche ran deep. He once said, "Being a star has made it possible for me to get insulted in places where the average Negro could never hope to go and get insulted." It was a poignant encapsulation of his groundbreaking yet troubled life and career. The mob ties that bound. The extent of Frank Sinatra's links to organized crime have been hotly debated for decades, but there's no question he had extensive connections to prominent mob figures, as did the Rat Pack as a whole. These associations would both help and hinder Sinatra and his pals throughout their careers. The Rat Pack frequently performed in Las Vegas hotels and casinos notorious for their mafia ownership in the 1950s and 60s. At the time, it was almost impossible for entertainers to work in Vegas and not have dealings with the mobsters who controlled the town. Some of Sinatra's closest friends and associates were well-known gangsters like Chicago boss Sam Giancana and the Giacalone brothers of Detroit. These relationships put Sinatra and the Rat Pack under FBI scrutiny for years, although charges were never brought against them. Kennedy, Sinatra, and the mob. The Rat Pack, especially Sinatra and Peter Lawford, brother-in-law to John F. Kennedy, were early, prominent supporters of Kennedy's 1960 White House bid. They campaigned for him and helped introduce him to influential figures, including some with mob connections. Sinatra felt betrayed when the Kennedy administration, with Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy leading the charge, began targeting the same mafia leaders that Sinatra considered friends. When word came that JFK would be staying with Bing Crosby rather than Sinatra on a trip to Palm Springs due to concerns over Sinatra's mob ties, a furious Sinatra smashed up the helipad he'd built for the occasion, the Sand Summit Standoff.
You ain't like today.
In 1962, upset over the government's continued scrutiny, Chicago boss Sam Giancana ordered the Rat Pack to perform a free show at his Northbrook, Illinois club, the Villa Venice. With the top mob figures from across the country in the audience, it was an offer they couldn't refuse. Some believe Giancana wanted to humiliate the superstars to demonstrate the far reach of his power. The performance went off without incident, but underscored the delicate balancing act the Rat Pack had to manage with their mob-connected benefactors on one hand and their political patron, Kennedy, on the other. Navigating those treacherous waters would contribute to the unraveling of the Rat Pack in the years to come, with Lawford's exile from the group and the collapse of Sinatra's relationship with the Kennedys. While they reigned supreme, the Rat Pack basked in the glow of fame and fortune, but a dark underworld forever lurked in the shadows, the acrimonious unraveling of the Rat Pack. As the cultural tides turned in the mid-1960s with the British invasion, the Vietnam War, and seismic social change, the Rat Pack's boozy, swinging persona began to feel dated and out of step with the times. The tragic death of John F. Kennedy in 1963, an event that hit Sinatra and company especially hard, in many ways marked the beginning of the end for the Rat Pack as an entity. The Sinatra-Lawford Fallout.
Sure, the notes are the same, but it hasn't got a beat.
A beat?
Yeah, you know, a beat.
Oh, no, I'm afraid I haven't got that. Look, why don't you take over?
Oh, no, wait a minute. I'm gonna crab your act.
No, I'm rather relieved. You see, I was supposed to be entertaining, but I'm hardly succeeding. Good night.
Peter Lawford, the brother-in-law of President John F. Kennedy, found himself in a precarious position as the ties between the Rat Pack and the Kennedy administration began to fray. Lawford had been instrumental in forging the connection between the two power centers, but as Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy cracked down on organized crime, Sinatra and his associates came under increasing scrutiny. The tensions came to a head when Lawford promised Sinatra that JFK would stay at the singer's Palm Springs home during a West Coast visit. Sinatra, eager to cement his relationship with the president, even had a heliport constructed to accommodate the visit. However, at the last minute, JFK's plans changed, and he opted to stay with Bing Crosby instead, fearing that Sinatra's alleged mob ties could prove politically damaging. Sinatra was furious, feeling betrayed by Lawford, whom he blamed for the snub. The incident effectively ended Lawford's close friendship with Sinatra and his tenure as a core member of the Rat Pack. Sinatra subsequently had Lawford's role in the upcoming film Ocean's 11 Inches greatly reduced and cut him from the cast of Robin and the Seven Hoods, replacing him with Crosby. The falling out had profound consequences for Lawford, both personally and professionally. His marriage to Patricia Kennedy ended in divorce in 1966, and his acting career went into a steady decline without Sinatra's backing. Lawford struggled with alcohol and drug dependence in the ensuing years, his once promising future derailed by the very connections that had made him a star. The Lawford-Sinatra rift was a turning point for the Rat Pack, exposing the fault lines that would eventually lead to the group's unraveling. It also demonstrated the high-stakes game of politics and power that swirled around the entertainers and the costly consequences of falling out of favor with the chairman of the board. Though Lawford and Sinatra would eventually reconcile to some extent, the glory days of the Rat Pack were effectively over. The Camelot era that Lawford embodied had given way to a darker, more tumultuous time, and the once unstoppable showbiz juggernaut would never regain its former luster. The Frank Sinatra-Joey Bishop feud.
Ain't you pitching Wednesday, aren't you? You want to hear the ocean?
Hear it, I can smell it.
While Peter Lawford's exile from the Rat Pack is well documented, he wasn't the only member to face Frank Sinatra's wrath. Joey Bishop, the group's longtime comedian, also found himself on the receiving end of old Blue Eyes ire, leading to a bitter falling out that lasted for years. According to authors Richard A. Lertzman and Lon Davis in their book Deconstructing the Rat Pack, the trouble started when Sinatra asked Bishop to fill in for him at the Cal Naval Lodge, a casino partially owned by Sinatra. Bishop, feeling that his star had risen considerably thanks to the Rat Pack's success, made excessive demands, including a $50,000 fee and a private jet. Sinatra, who prided himself on loyalty and felt he was largely responsible for Bishop's elevated status, was incensed by what he saw as Bishop's ingratitude and arrogance. He abruptly hung up on Bishop and promptly cut him out of future Rat Pack projects, including the film Robin and the Seven Hoods. The rift between the two men would never fully heal. Bishop, who had worked tirelessly since the 1930s to achieve success, felt he deserved more recognition for his contributions to the Rat Pack's popularity. He grew increasingly resentful that he was often viewed as a mere adjunct to Sinatra, Martin, and Davis Jr. In later years, Bishop would express his bitterness, lamenting in a Time magazine article, "One guy wrote that I worked with the Rat Pack occasionally. Occasionally. Another talks about how I kissed Frank's ass. That hurt me a little bit. I know I sound bitter, but I have a right to." Despite the animosity, those close to Bishop say he still held great affection for Sinatra. But the damage to their friendship and working relationship was irreparable. Bishop's career never again reached the heights it had during the Rat Pack's glory days, a fact he attributed to being iced out by Sinatra. The Sinatra-Bishop feud underscores the fragile egos and power dynamics at play within the Rat Pack, even at the peak of their fame. It also highlights Sinatra's unquestioned role as the group's leader and gatekeeper, able to make or break the careers of those in his orbit. While Bishop and Sinatra would eventually reconcile to some degree, their relationship never fully recovered from the wounds inflicted during the Cal Naval fallout. It stands as a stark reminder that even in the Rat Pack's seemingly unbreakable bond, no one was immune from the chairman of the board's temper and his uncompromising code of loyalty. Escalating tensions with Davis and Martin.
That's why I wondered you were picking on me tonight.
Pick on you?
Yeah.
They always picked on me. These two guys picked on me in the old days unmercifully.
Shut up, Sam.
Sammy Davis Jr.'s substance abuse issues were also taking a heavy toll by this juncture, creating friction with his Rat Pack collaborators. According to Davis's daughter Tracy, after years of putting up with racist mistreatment by Kennedy and enduring demeaning jokes even from his so-called friends, the entertainer was a broken man behind his high-spirited facade and increasingly turned to drugs and alcohol to cope. Meanwhile, Dean Martin's easygoing, boozy shtick was wearing thin. He frequently clashed with the mercurial Sinatra, who resented Martin's lack of dedication to the late-night carousing that was such an integral part of the Rat Pack's carefully honed image. When Martin failed to show up for a Kennedy gala the group was performing at, it created a permanent fissure between the two entertainers. The Last Hurrah, a much ballyhooed Rat Pack reunion tour in 1987, 25 years after the group's heyday, laid bare just how much the once tight-knit quintet had unraveled over the intervening decades. Martin, who had just endured the devastating loss of his son Dean Paul in a plane crash, was especially disengaged, often smoking and flubbing his lyrics on stage. Sinatra found Martin's lackadaisical attitude infuriating and unprofessional. After a few dates, Martin abruptly dropped out, offering a vague excuse about kidney problem. He resurfaced in Vegas just days later for his own performances, leaving Sinatra seething. The tour limped on, but the old magic and camaraderie were gone. It was an ignominious end for the once unstoppable showbiz juggernaut. The descent of Dean Martin.
Now tell them what you got in the cup. They probably think it's booze or something. You always pretend.
It's booze or something.
Oh, I know you drink a lot of apple juice.
If that's apple juice, then I'm Al Capone. No, I just said, huh?
That was a good year for apples.
Dean Martin's onstage antics during the ill-fated reunion tour were more than just Rat Pack hijinks. They were a window into the very real and painful deterioration of one of entertainment's most seemingly effortless performers. Martin had long grappled with a crippling fear of audiences, an affliction that left the ordinarily easygoing star tense and irritable before shows. This had been kept in check during the Rat Pack's prime, with his drunky act providing a humorous outlet. But with advancing age, flagging energy, and a growing dependence on alcohol offstage as well as on, the act was becoming all too real. The 1987 death of his son Dino in a military plane crash hit the entertainer especially hard. Already struggling with the early stages of pulmonary emphysema from years of heavy smoking, the devastated Martin retreated further into himself and his vices. Sinatra tried to pull his old friend out of his downward spiral, but Martin pushed him and everyone else away. A recluse in his final years. As the 1990s dawned, the once affable, energetic Martin had become a virtual recluse. Racked by emphysema and still reeling from his son's death, he spent his final years shuttling quietly between his Beverly Hills home and his favorite restaurants, rarely seen in public. The man who had recorded over 100 albums and anchored dozens of films and TV shows died on Christmas Day 1995 at age 78, in a sad coda that exemplified how far he had drifted from his Rat Pack heyday. Neither Sinatra nor any of the old gang attended his funeral. For the surviving Rat Packers, it was an isolating glimpse into their own mortality that would be repeated as the decade played out. Frank Sinatra's final bow. As the unquestioned leader and biggest name in the Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra was both the original group's greatest driving force and the last link to its faded mystique as he continued performing long after the others had died or left the stage. In the 1990s, a gaunt but game Sinatra continued a punishing concert schedule against doctors' advice as his own health declined. Friends worried but knew better than to question the legendary entertainer's resolve. When Dean Martin died in 1995, a devastated Sinatra openly wept on stage, dedicating an emotional rendition of One for My Baby to his departed friend. Yet, true to the Rat Pack's fabled machismo, he stoically refused to attend the funeral, not wanting to see his pal laid out. The final curtain.
And Frank pitched forward and fell. His head hit the monitor and then hit the stage. It was really loud. It was really horrifying. It was the most awful thing that I've ever seen.
In 1995, an increasingly frail Sinatra collapsed on stage while performing in Virginia and was hospitalized for exhaustion and a mild heart attack. Under mounting pressure from friends and family, he announced his retirement 2 years later on February 25, 1997. His 80-plus years of hard living were finally catching up to him. The man who once crooned, "I did it my way," spent his final months confined to a wheelchair, enfeebled by heart disease, cancer, senility, and Alzheimer's. When he died on May 14, 1998, at age 82, the lights had already long since been turned off on the Rat Pack's Vegas reign. The last of the core members, Joey Bishop, followed Sinatra to the grave in 2007. By then, the Rat Pack was more of a nostalgic memory than a living, breathing concern. But what a memory it was. At once the ultimate embodiment of a bygone era of American entertainment and a cautionary tale about the costs of fame, fortune, and fast living. Through all the well-documented hijinks and misbehavior, one immutable fact remains. We shall never see the likes of the Rat Pack again. For better and for worse, the Rat Pack's enduring appeal. Despite the last surviving member of the Rat Pack, Joey Bishop, passing away in 2007, the group's legacy continues to captivate and influence popular culture to this day. Their iconic style, music, and performances have been celebrated, imitated, and reimagined across multiple generations and mediums. In the years since their heyday, numerous biopics, documentaries, and dramatizations have sought to capture the essence of the Rat Pack's magic and delve into the complex personal lives of its members. Films like The Rat Pack, 1998, and The Frank Sinatra Story, 1992, have offered glimpses into the group's rise to fame, their connections to organized crime, and their political affiliations with the Kennedy family. More recently, the 2018 documentary Sinatra in Palm Springs and the 2021 podcast series The Rat Pack Podcast have shed new light on the group's dynamics, their individual struggles, and the impact they had on each other's lives and careers. These projects have helped to humanize the larger-than-life figures and provide a more nuanced understanding of their experiences. The Rat Pack's influence can also be seen in the countless tributes, impersonations, and homages that continue to populate the entertainment landscape. From the Ocean's 11 film franchise to the hit television series Mad Men, the Rat Pack's signature style, music, and devil-may-care attitude have been lovingly recreated and referenced as shorthand for a particular brand of timeless cool. However, as we've explored throughout this video, the reality behind the Rat Pack's glamorous facade was often far more complex and troubled than their public image suggested. From the racism and mob ties that plagued Sammy Davis Jr. to the bitter feuds that tore the group apart, the Rat Pack's story is one of soaring highs and devastating lows. Yet, through it all, their talent, charisma, and undeniable chemistry have endured. The music they created, the performances they gave, and the style they embodied continue to resonate with audiences around the world. While the men themselves were flawed and fallible, their collective legacy remains a testament to the power of entertainment to transcend time and connect people across generations. As we look back on the Rat Pack's journey, from their early days in the nightclubs of New York and Chicago to their final fractured years, we are reminded of the unshakable mark they left on American culture. Theirs is a story of friendship, betrayal, triumph, and tragedy, played out against the backdrop of a rapidly changing world. And while we may never see another group quite like them, the Rat Pack spirit lives on, forever etched into the fabric of entertainment history. Now it's time to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the Rat Pack's legacy? Do you think their influence on popular culture has been positive, negative, or a mix of both? And which member of the Rat Pack do you find most fascinating or tragic? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.